As we enter our third week of this list, I was again thrown off course in my attempt to group movies by weekly theme. I did note that the first few entries this week are definitely darker than previous entries, and if you've already seen these films, then you'll know why. But if you haven't seen them yet, well, you'll see. As before, take these few seconds as your clear content warning for horror tropes, frightening material, and disturbing themes. So let's get to it. In a once ordinary neighborhood in Buenos Aires, strange events are beginning to occur. A woman is hearing voices, a man's furniture is moved about when he sleeps at night, and a woman's lost child seems to have reappeared. It's enough to put a police officer and a group of paranormal investigators on the trail, but none of them are truly prepared for what they're about to discover. Why is Aterrados so frightening? It literally translates to terrified. It's a mix of classic horror, science fiction, and academic research, and police procedural, meaning it crosses the mundane and the frightening quite easily. This is the kind of film that lingers in your brain for a few days after you've seen it. When you're washing dishes, when you're putting away your clothes, and yes, when you're in bed trying to sleep, hoping that the furniture isn't moving around. As the poster explicitly tells us, they're inside your home and they're watching you. What is truly terrifying about this film is that the audience won't necessarily get it. And I think the point is that we aren't meant to. There is something almost Lovecraftian about this movie. Sometimes horror just is. There is no explanation for it, and if you're trying to find meaning in what's happening, well, you've come to see the wrong film. Watch the first one and then stop. There's something about James Wan that just makes him dream up the scariest shit, sometimes literally if unfootnoted Wikipedia entries are to be believed. 2013's The Conjuring is, in my opinion, one of the fluffiest feathers in his cap. Side note, another trademark of James Wan is not knowing when to stop. The first entries in his franchises are always the best. Saw, Insidious, etc. I realize that he may not always have control over what films get made, and because his films are usually blockbusters, greedy movie studios can't help themselves. But let it be said, it's best to stop at one. Anyway, back to The Conjuring. Based on several real people and controversial events, the film follows the Perron family, who have recently moved into a Rhode Island farmhouse and begin to be terrorized by unseen forces. Enter a team of paranormal investigators led by Ed and Lorraine Warren, who must not only document the evil, but save the family. Featuring a stellar cast of horror movie veterans, The Conjuring manages to be a leave-the-lights-on frightening experience, while still having a heart. You'll really feel for the families in the film, both the Warrens and the Perrons, and when you're not scared shitless, you'll be legitimately furious with the film baddies for putting them through what they did. You should, of course, take the depictions of real-life characters and supposed real-life events with a heavy dose of salt, but it shouldn't stop you from appreciating what the characters, real and fictional, were trying to do. The Witch, or, as Robert Eggers calls it, the Witch. Calm down, of course I think Eggers is fantastic. When I learned that this was his debut film, I knew to look out for him. And with subsequent glorious work like The Lighthouse and The Northman, I'm sure I wasn't wrong. The same can be said for The Witch's star player, Anya Taylor-Joy, who seems to have been batting 100 from the get-go considering this is also her first film. The Witch follows a Puritan family that has been exiled from their village and must now survive on their own. We never learn the reason for this exile, only that William, the head of the household, is determined not to return to town on principle, considering the dispute to be a matter of faith. It's all fine and dandy until their youngest child, a newborn baby, is taken by a woman in a long red cape. Eggers draws from New England folktales about witches because, of course. One thing I thought about when I was watching it is how curious it is that those stories mostly involve white women, meaning that when the white people sailed over to America, the witches did too. How bizarre is that? All those Puritans sailing over, none of them noticed the witches on the ship? Anyway, there are truly horrifying moments in the film that will haunt you. You will walk around for a few days feeling generally upset at the world unless you take measures to lift your mood. So, watch a few dozen cat videos. That being said, I almost didn't include this film on this list because I consider it to be primarily a religious film. The terrible beauty of this movie isn't the witch in the woods or Anya Taylor-Joy's gorgeous face. Ultimately, this film will stay with you because of the profound things it has to say about faith and the existence of good and evil in this world. Stay with me. This one is one of the most frightening for me, but also one of the most worthwhile watches. This is another film that I almost didn't include on this list because I consider it primarily to be a religious film. Make no mistake, this is fucking terrifying. This will keep you up at night, contemplating your existence and how you have lived your life. But beneath the blanket of horror, there is a deeper message that I didn't think Brian Bertino was capable of delivering based on his previous body of work. The Dark and the Wicked follows two siblings who return home to check on their parents. Despite their mother's warnings not to come visit their ailing father, brother and sister arrive on their old farm. It's clear that the family has been driven apart, but before they can begin mending fences, something evil arrives. Or perhaps, as the film wants you to consider, it was already there. Scrape back the layers of fear and find what the film has to say about family, love, and faith. I promise it's there. I initially thought about grouping this with last week's House of the Devil, since it shares the characteristics of being a fantastic film from a director who would then go on to miss with subsequent work. But to be fair to Ty West, he had one bad film. Meanwhile, M. Night Shyamalan has had so many questionable films after The Sixth Sense that for a few years I had to remind myself how good this movie was in order to make myself give M. Night Shyamalan another chance. So first, my history with this movie. One cool evening in early 2000, my siblings and I stayed up late to sneak into the living room and play a videotape that our parents had strictly forbidden us from seeing. None of us were anywhere near 13, and our parents were out of town, and the uncle keeping an eye on us had gone to bed on faith that we wouldn't do anything silly. The movie was The Sixth Sense. There is a scene in The Sixth Sense that got my older brother and younger brother to hug each other, Shaggy and Scooby-Doo style, while our poor youngest, then only aged 7, spent half the film with his body wedged into the tiny space between me and the sofa, his face pressed into my back. We've since revisited the film as adults, and while it doesn't quite hold the same sway over us as a horror film, we agree that it deserves every inch of praise that it has gotten over the years, and even then, it might not be enough. It's the kind of film that will make you grudgingly trudge to the cinema to watch yet another M. Night Shyamalan film on the off chance that it will be like this rather than The Last Airbender. Yes, sorry, I had to bring it up. I may have loved 2015's The Visit, but all is not yet forgiven. For those who have yet to see it, welcome Zoomers! You'll get to see Bruce Willis, child psychologist, try to figure out what's happening to a child who claims to be visited by ghosts. He's understandably skeptical at first, but as pieces of evidence begin to pile up, he realizes that sweet Haley Joel Osment is the real deal. I mean, look at that face. Could that ever lie? As if our mothers weren't terrifying enough. I wish I could access the 2008 short film that this one was expanded on by the same director, Andy Muschietti, because I feel that as a whole, a shorter film would be more effective. That isn't to say that 2013's Mama is bad. I mean, it did make $146 million against a $15 million budget. Overall, like much of any work associated with Guillermo del Toro, who served as a producer in this, Mama is a beautiful film with a deeply human core. It's frightening, yes, but it's also painful and touching in ways that will stay with you longer than any fear it may evoke. The film opens with Jeffrey, who figures in a car crash with his 2 daughters. Wandering around the forest they end up in, they come to a creepy abandoned cabin where they encounter a shadowy figure. 6 years later, Lucas, yes, that's Jamie Lannister you're seeing on screen, is thrilled to discover that his 2 nieces by his missing twin brother are still alive, and he and his partner take them in. Problem is, something else has been parenting these kids for 6 years, and it isn't too happy that Lucas has taken them away from home. Be advised, there are definitely some plot gaps in this one that may annoy you if you think too hard about it. A few characters behave in nonsensical ways, and some details just invite more questions rather than tie it together seamlessly. This is why I think this would have worked better as a short film, with less explaining. After all, some horror stories don't have to disclose everything. I would totally have bought into the concept of an eldritch mother figure parenting a few lost kids without needing the who, how, or why. Still, condensed to the basic storyline and enriched by fabulous performances and effects all around, this is a film with enduring appeal to me, so I highly recommend you check it out. Let's lighten up. Sort of. Samara Weaving is the millennial queen of black comedy horror. I'm calling it now. And Exhibit A, in my case, is 2019's Ready or Not. Sorry, The Babysitter, I know you're her earlier film, but Ready or Not has the distinction of having me scream both with laughter and horror at the same time. Grace has just married into a wealthy family that made its fortune in games. Her doting husband assures her that she'll fit right in, and Grace is eager to do so given her background as an orphan and foster child. There's only one family tradition she needs to take part in, pulling a game card from a puzzle box that has been in the family for generations. The other in-laws tell her it will be fine, except Grace isn't like them. When she pulls her card, she has to play a game where losing isn't an option. Ready or Not doesn't pull punches when it comes to gore and violence, but it doesn't feel gratuitous because of the tightly woven plot and fantastic performances all around. Whether you classify this as horror or comedy, you're guaranteed to have fun with this one. I can't believe we're already on week 3. I have so many films to choose from for the remaining spots on our 30 Days of Horror list, so I hope you guys will tune in for the last installment next week. Sleep tight, kids.